Can Yordle generate more gold with the needlessly big gem? Does social distancing get disabled because of summoned units? And is there a range limit to Nasus, his ability? Welcome to the 5th episode of the TFT Mythbuster series for set 9. Let's get started. For our first myth, we are checking the shimmer scale item called Needlessly Big Gem. If you put this item on a unit, it will tick down from 15 seconds at the start of combat and grant you a damage steroid and gold for every 2 units that are still alive. The item description tells us that you receive 1 gold for every 2 living allies. But what exactly counts as a living ally? The myth states, units that are summoned with the help of the Yordle will generate gold for the needlessly large gem. In this fight we have a Scion with our shimmer item and a total of 9 units at the start of combat. We are currently in the Yordle portal region, which means Ryze will first summon units from the bench and later randomize tier 3 and tier 4 units onto the board. Halfway through the fight, 3 of the frontliners and 1 of the backliners died, putting us at a total of 5 original units that are left on the board when the countdown of the gem reaches 0. There are also 5 summoned units on the board, which are easy to spot because of their small unit size. We can see that the gem is only granting us 2 gold. From the looks of it, only the starting lineup is taken into consideration, so everything that is being summoned later on, for example with Zizirod or with the Yordle simply does not count. For our second myth, let's take a look at the augment Social Distancing. This augment will grant an AD and AP buff to every unit that doesn't have an adjacent ally at the start of combat. The myth states, units that start next to summoned units like the t-hex or the void spawn still receive the buff from Social Distancing. This was a pretty interesting myth to investigate. Social Distancing can be an annoying augment because you might end up in a spot where you want to buff all of your units, but your board just ends up filling up and you can't find any free hexes anymore. We will do 3 tests for this myth. 1 for the Piltover t-hex, 1 for the void spawn, and 1 for the Heimerdinger turret. In the first fight, we can see a Warwick in the front row and an Orianna in the third row. Adjacent to both of them is the t-hex in the second row. Once the combat starts, we can see that Warwick and Orianna both receive the AD and the AP steroid. In the second fight, we have a similar setup with Rek'Sai in the front, Kassadin in the third row, and the void spawn in the middle of them. Like before, neither Rek'Sai nor Kassadin are bothered by this, and both of them get buffed. In the third fight, we have a Heimerdinger turret in between a Galio and a Zed. This time we also have the prismatic version of Social Distancing, so the buff will be more noticeable. The combat starts and we can see that they profit from the augment. All of this clearly indicates that the myth is true, but there is one more test I would like to do. While the units adjacent to the summons receive their buff, what about the summons themselves? In the last fight, if we check the turret, we can see that it did not receive any AD buffs and the bonus AP came from Heimerdinger. In a follow-up fight, the Heimerdinger turret is now isolated, and when the combat starts, we can see that the turret receives both the AD and the AP from the augment. The same will also apply to other summons like the t-hex. While the initial myth that these summons don't deny the buff to other units stays true, they can still lose the buff themselves. For our last myth, let's take a closer look at Nasus. Most players have gotten used to this unit as an off-tank, usually in Shurima or Juggernaut, so they likely never thought too much about his ability that makes him steal stats from the nearest enemies. But what exactly does nearest even mean? The myth states, Nasus, his ability, has no range limit. Now you might ask yourself in which case this would be relevant, but this is crucial knowledge if you ever tried to play Nasus as a carry in combination with scoped weapons. All we need to do is find a fight where he stays comfortable in the backline, but there aren't enough units left in the front line. He casts his ability and we can see that even the top right corner is getting their stats stolen. So nearest in this context means the 4 closest enemies based around Nasus his position, which in some cases can end up hitting the other side of the board. 3 more myths down and many more to go. I'll probably do a future episode that ends up answering questions you might have that don't really fit well into the Mythbuster series. If you're wondering about something, just leave a comment and it might get featured in the future. I hope you learned something and see you next time.